What's up, everybody? My name is Huzaifa and I love math. I'm a math teacher, a math tutor. I do all sorts of stuff with math. Today, I'm going to be reading a little story I made called Mr. Exponential and the Playtime Palace. It's a fun story that will also teach you about something that you may have heard of called exponential growth. And if you're not sure what that word means, don't worry. You will see what it means as we go through the story. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a business tycoon named Mr. McCann. He owned Playtime Palace, the world's largest toy factory. Mr. McCann did not care about making good toys. Instead, he only wanted to sell as many toys as possible so he could be the richest tycoon in the world. And if you haven't heard that word tycoon before, it is somebody who has a lot of money. Many of Mr. McCann's toys didn't work properly or had missing parts. He didn't care about any of that. As long as people kept buying these toys, Mr. McCann was happy. Mr. McCann had two chief toy designers, a kind gentleman named Exponential and a selfish inventor named Rise Overrun. Rise Overrun was not only an inventor, but he was the next in line to inherit Playtime Palace once Mr. McCann retired. Mr. McCann liked Rise Overrun a great deal. Like Mr. McCann, Rise only cared about money. Rise planned to keep making bad toys for a high profit once he was in charge. Now, if you haven't heard that word profit before, profit is essentially the money that you make when you sell something. It might cost you a certain amount to build a robot, and then you'll sell it for a certain price, and that difference in between is the profit, the amount of money that you actually get to keep and take home. But it was Exponential that was the rightful heir of Playtime Palace. Lex's family had built it. And again, if you haven't heard of that word heir before, H-E-I-R, that means that he was the one that was supposed to inherit or have Playtime Palace. Years ago, Mr. McCann had stolen the factory from Lex's grandfather. Playtime Palace used to make the best toys, but Mr. McCann changed that. One warm afternoon, Mr. McCann asked to speak with Lex and Rise about a new toy. It was a terrible toy, but Mr. McCann knew it would make a great deal of money. Mr. McCann needed to make a large quantity of toys in 30 days, so he decided to split the work between Lex and Rise. He offered Rise a salary of $1,000 per day, a very generous and fair offer. For Lex, he only offered $100 per day. Lex was outraged, but Mr. McCann did not care. Mr. McCann despised Lex. And if you haven't heard that word despise, when you despise someone, it means you really don't like them very much. Lex was very sad. He couldn't believe the way he was being treated. Lex nearly left the toy factory forever. But suddenly, he had an idea. You see, Lex was a brilliant mathematician. Moreover, he knew that Mr. McCann detested math. Lex figured it was time to use his math knowledge to win back Playtime Palace. The next morning, Exponential went to Mr. McCann's office to discuss the toy production arrangement. "Mr. McCann," said Lex, you don't treat me very well. You stole this business from my family years ago and stopped making the amazing toys we used to produce." Lex continued without hesitation. "As such, this will be my last project for you. But I have good news. You don't have to pay me $100 per day." Mr. McCann was intrigued. "Interesting, so what do you want?" asked Mr. McCann. Lex paused briefly before speaking. "It's simple. Start my salary on the first day at $1 per day. That's it. I only ask that you double my payment each day." Mr. McCann laughed heartily. $1, you fool. Your pride is costing you your salary and your career. But if that's your wish, I happily agree. But only if Mr. McCann understood the power of exponential growth, he would have never made such an agreement. And if you see this graph here, I know it looks confusing and it may not make a lot of sense, but the idea is with exponential growth, things start growing slowly and then they build faster and faster, and then all of a sudden they're building super fast. The next day, Lex and Rise began their work. At the end of each day, Mr. McCann noted how much money he owed each person. On day one, he wrote down that he owed Rise Overrun that huge sum of $1,000, and Exponential just got $1 in the bank. But on day two, Rise Overrun, his amount that he was owed stayed the same. He still got another $1,000, which means he was owed $2,000 in total. But Lex, for that day, was owed $2 because, as the arrangement stated, the amount paid each day was to double. So now Lex is owed $3 in total, Rise Overrun, $2,000. The next day, Lex got $4, and then $8. So again, doubling means we're timesing it by 2. The other way to think about doubling is if I was owed $4 the day before, the next day, I'm owed 4 plus 4. Now I'm at 8. If this day is 8, the next day is going to be 8 plus 8, which is 16. So for the first 4 days, we see that Rise Overrun is making way more money, and this deal doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for Exponential. But let's see what happens. On day 5, now Lex is earning $16. $32, right? We're doubling. 64, and now 128. Doesn't look so bad. We still see that Rise Over Run has made $8,000 by this point. Lex Potential, a mere $255. But now we're gonna see the power of doubling and the power of exponential growth. On day 9, Lex got 256. Day 10, a little more than $500. And day 11 is an interesting day because day 11 is the first time that Lex is now earning more than Rise Over Run per day. It didn't take that long, but now he's making a little over $1,000. And day 12, he's up to $2,000. Mr. McCann was quite surprised that he was now paying Lex nearly double what he paid Rise, right? Rise was making $1,000, Lex was making a little bit more than $2,000. But little did Mr. McCann know, the real surprise was yet to come. On day 13, now Lex was getting $4,000. The next day, $8,000, $16,000, and then $32,000. At this point, we're a little more than halfway through the 30 days. Lex is owed $65,000, and Rise Over Run, just $16,000. Now we go to $65,000 for day 17, $130, $260, and now nearly $500,000 is owed just for day 20, with the grand total being owed to him of $1 million. Can you believe it? $1 million versus $20,000. Now we come to the final 10-day stretch. $1 million is owed the next day, $2 million, $4 million, $8 million, $16 million, $33 million, $67 million, and then over $100 million for day 28. Day 29, $260 million, and day 30, $500 million. If you guys aren't familiar with that, that's $500 million. And look at that total. Look at the difference in size in those 30 days, how quickly it grew. And it's very interesting because Lex started out getting way less than Rise Over Run. And in a matter of 30 days, he's getting so much more than him. By the end of the 30-day period, Mr. McCann owed Rise Over Run exactly $30,000, a large sum of money indeed. But Lex was owed much, much more. Lex had managed to earn over $1 billion. Mr. McCann was furious. He had no idea that he would end up owing so much money. As a result of the arrangement, Mr. McCann went bankrupt and was forced to sell Playtime Palace to Lex in order to resolve his debt. So if you haven't heard that word debt before, debt is when you owe somebody something, right? If you take money from somebody and you now owe them that money back, like you say, hey, can I have $5? Sure, but you gotta pay me back. That's called being in debt to that person. But this was not a bad thing. It meant that Lex was able to reclaim Playtime Palace for his family. From that day forward, Lex Potential made sure to only make the best toys in the world, and children everywhere rejoiced. Everything in the world of toys was right again, and it all happened because Lex knew the power of exponential growth. The end. So I hope you enjoyed that story, and the takeaway message is when we're thinking about exponential growth, that's a great way to think about it, is instead of growing by that same amount every day, by $1,000 every day, with exponential growth, we're not growing by the same amount. The amount changes, and the way we can think about it is a doubling factor. So it went from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, 16, 32, so on and so forth. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Stay safe and keep working hard in school. Take it easy.